Hey everyone, I'm Scott Brandley, and every member of the church has a story to share, one that can instill faith, invite growth, and inspire others. On today's episode, we're going to talk about a special trip that some family and friends and I took to Illinois in 2019, where we made some incredible discoveries that tie back to Christ and the Book of Mormon. Welcome to Latter-day Lights. Hey everyone, welcome to Latter-day Lights. We're so glad you're here with us today, and we have a special treat for you today. This is actually part 4 of a 5-part mini-series about the launch of my new book, Faith to Stay. And as part of that launch, I talk about some incredible discoveries that we made back in 2019 on a trip to Illinois. And I'm here with 2 of my uncles who are also my best friends, John Brandley and Myron Brandley.
Hello.
Hi.
And they were on the trip with me. So there was actually quite a few of us. My dad was with us. Didn't Jake, your son, come with us?
Jacob, yep.
And
Wayne May.
You guys may have heard of him. He's well known in the Book of Mormon archaeology world. He runs a magazine called American
Archaeology?
American Archaeology. He runs a magazine that talks about different archaeological finds in North America. And he came with us, and my dad was with us.
And Mark, who was a professor from Southern Illinois University.
So the reason why we went to Illinois is because my dad found out that there was a man who had been collecting artifacts his entire life, and he passed away. And he lived just northwest of Nauvoo, Illinois. And he wanted to go to this auction. And he was really excited about it. And so he recruited us to go with him on this trip. And we didn't really know what we were going to find when we got there, but it was a trip of a lifetime. So
the trip we went on was, you can see that book in the picture. Keokuk is where he found all of these axeheads, and the guy that was there that found them, and thousands of artifacts and Indian arrowheads and jewelry, and so they basically were auctioning off his whole life's work. And Dave, our brother Dave, that Scott's dad, was very interested in American Indians and how they connected to the story of the Book of Mormon. And he had some personal experiences that really drew him to North America. And so it was not just an Indiana Jones trip, but it was a spiritual trip too, because we wanted to, go to these places. And, you go to Nauvoo or you go to Palmyra and you're like, what happened here? Where are the arrowheads? Where's the evidence? And then we go to an auction and they have tens of thousands of artifacts that this guy just collected walking along the riverbank between Nauvoo and little towns along there. And so
on his farm, his plows would pull up new stuff every year.
There were tables and tables.
And this is just one guy, and they have these auctions all the time. And so I had a friend that his brother was a state president out by Palmyra, and same thing. They would go and as soon as the farmer plowed and there was rain, they'd send the kids out there and they'd find tons of artifacts. And so in fact, when we went to these little towns, we would go in to the homes where they have their own little museums, and we would try to buy their stuff. And so, which they sold to us most of the time. They're they would collect it and sell it. So right there in Nauvoo, there was that house that we went to. Remember that house?
Well, and he said his whole attic was full of artifacts.
Yeah, his son's like, as soon as my dad dies, you can have all this stuff. So we're like, we'll come back. But he had a pot. Remember the pot he had that had a circle with an X in it.
Yeah.
And we saw that symbol several places. We saw a lot of other symbols that we'll talk about, but just very interesting. And Dave passed away 3 years ago yesterday. And so this is kind of not a coincidence that we're doing this today. I'm sure Dave's going to help Myron through this. Myron's really shy. Quiet.
That's right.
Myron was probably the closest to Dave, and Scott and I are really close. And so it was a fun trip because we are best friends. We're not just, family. We are friends too. And so we want to do things together. So any excuse for us to go do something, and Dave came up with this, hey, let's go to this auction. My wife's like, what? And
go across the country
to go buy some arrowheads that I could buy online, but we're gonna fly there.
It was amazing to go in that building. It was a huge steel building. I don't know how big, 100 feet at least, if not more.
It was pretty big.
And there were tables, rows and rows and rows of tables. And it was amazing to see all these artifacts.
Yeah.
And it's, from axeheads to arrowheads. And they cover a couple of different eras.
Mm-hmm.
They talk about the Hopewell Indians. And you can see some of these arrowheads, like this, is from the Hopewell era.
Right.
Which was, if you ask the archaeologists, they come from about 500 BC to about 400 AD, that range. Well, if you think about that in terms of the Book of Mormon, it aligns with something,
there's
right?
a pretty good alignment there.
Aligned with the Nephite and Lamanites really well there. And then other of these, such as this type of arrowhead, is from the Adena era,
right,
which lines up really closely with the Jaredites.
Yeah.
So to be able to see that was
the Adena
really awesome.
ones taper at the bottom, and then the Hopewell ones have a hook.
Yeah. So you can tell really quickly.
These ones are
easily.
Hopewell. I don't know if you guys can see this. This is my dad's collection. But these arrowheads have this hook on the bottom. So these are Hopewell arrowheads, and these ones are tapered at the bottom. And these are Adena, which we believe is Jaredite, because they're much, much older than the Hopewell. So
You got some good knife points in there and some other things too.
yeah, so my dad also so one of the things that he had at this auction was this copper bracelet, which is pretty cool. So we have that there. And so this is my dad's collection from that auction. This is Myron's collection, which he got the best deal at the whole auction. He got all of those for like $40.
We went there, and there was a lot of big collectors.
Oh, yeah.
There was this one guy, he was buying everything. He was thousands and thousands of dollars. And Myron leaned over to me and he's like, I got like $45. So hopefully I'll get a couple broken arrows, something. Maybe that guy goes to the bathroom and I get something. He's like, I have a feeling it's going to work out. And I'm like, it's totally going to work out for you. That guy went to get a tenderloin sandwich. They had these big pork tenderloin sandwiches, and he was out. This one that is in the middle of the table is Myron's. It came up, and we all looked around, and Myron was like 35, 40, and then no one was bidding on it. And we're like, you are kidding me. And then he bought that, and then he's like, that was at the beginning of the auction. He's like,
I'm done.
Okay, I'm done.
And then Scott and I spent like $1,000, and we have like 4 that are not even, none of them are as good. We didn't. You notice we didn't bring
I
any
didn't even bring mine.
because ours are garbage. So
Well, and we left after halfway through the auction or something, but Dave stayed, and he spent, I have no idea how
A
much
lot.
money.
Dave spent another like $1,500, and then he said to Scott and I, and I quote, "Hey, I got a bunch of stuff for us. We'll just split it 3 ways." Right? And Scott and I are like, oh, we just got hosed. So now we spent another $500 each on stuff that we didn't bring to show you because Dave's stuff is really good.
Well, my stuff isn't in a nice case. I have it on a shelf.
Yeah.
And Dave was very generous. I came home and I did not have an axe head, So the axe head over there,
This
Oh,
one?
you got
That
to see
one.
that one.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool
That's
one.
Look
a
at,
nice
look at
one.
the edge on that.
and he donated that to me because I didn't get an axe head.
Yes, everything works out for Myron. He got all the best stuff.
About everything.
Here's another cool one.
That's-
So
That is
one of
really
mine.
cool.
this is Johnny's. So the cool thing about these axe heads, which comes back to this book. So when I was at the auction, I saw this book, and I knew that Keokuk was across the river from Nauvoo, but it was wrapped in the original like cellophane or whatever, so I couldn't open the book. But I knew where Keokuk was, and I'm like, this is fascinating. Nobody knows that there was these ancient stone axes across the river from Nauvoo.
It's just a few miles from Nauvoo, yeah.
And so I bought that book at the auction. I bid on it and I won it. And then I got some of these axe heads in the auction as well. But the cool thing about that book is this is just some random farmer that wrote this book. And he found some axe heads. He wrote this book. He had found some axe heads on his property. And he started talking to some of the other farmers around. And they had found axes too. So he started to document all of these ancient stone axe heads that had been found around the Nauvoo, Keokuk area. And the coolest, so that book has hundreds. I mean, look how thick this is a serious book. This has hundreds of axe heads in it. Like, I'll just flip through it so you can see. Hundreds of axe heads that have been found around Nauvoo. But the coolest part is at the beginning, he has a map. He has a map of all of the places. No, I won't be able to. Oh, it's right here. All these little dots are where axe heads have been found all around the Nauvoo area. Nobody knows that this exists because this guy probably sold 20 of these books. He spent years putting it together. He's like, I made this amazing book about axe heads. And everybody's like, uh-huh.
At the auction, you could actually buy some of these axe heads, but they were selling for thousands.
Yeah,
of
that
dollars.
that one guy was like
He was
bidding
buying
up
them
everything.
because they're now documented. But there was one axe head. It was this big. It was huge.
Yeah.
And there were a couple of them that big, and we were too cheap, so we didn't buy any. But it's amazing the variety of the axe heads and the arrowheads and the knives, and there's some jewelry.
Yeah. So there's some beads. Show that, Myron.
This
To
is just
one of the cameras. That's a beaded necklace made out of some type of stone or something.
Yeah, they had in a lot of these mounds in North America, they find a lot of jewelry, a lot of pearls. They made their own pearls.
This is made out of shells.
Yeah, this
Which
is
also talks to the point that they traded and traveled.
yeah.
They didn't just stay in one
At
spot
Mordecai
necessarily.
Hopewell's place, where all the name comes from Dr. Mordecai Hopewell, they found over 12,000 artifacts. They found copper armor with thousands of pearls sewn onto it. They found a guy that was 7 feet tall in that main mound, and he was clad in copper armor from head to toe. And the Smithsonian did that dig. So anything that they found a lot of those effigy pipes that are very, noteworthy for the Hopewell. It's one of those things. If you find a effigy pipe, then it's probably Hopewell. And the same thing with pearls. They found shark teeth. They found bear claws. They found obsidian arrowheads. I've got one in here. That basically comes from Yellowstone. So there was a vast trade network. They were trading in the Gulf and on the Atlantic and all the way to the Rocky Mountains. And so these people had a lot of influence, and there's hundreds of thousands of settlements and even more, millions of mounds that are in North America, but organized. And so we were interested we'd been on a couple trips.
Yeah.
Dave wanted to go to this auction. We said, okay, let's go. And he's like, I'm going to get my buddy Wayne to come with us, and he's going to show us some stuff in Illinois, and we'd never been there before. Right. So we went to Southern Illinois, and Wayne brought his friend Mark, who was amazing, and his professor. there at Southern Illinois University. And so he had walked these hills and these forts, and he is an evangelical Christian. He's not LDS, but loves Wayne. Wayne relates to all these people. And
Well, it was cool that Wayne knew him because this guy had grown up down in Southern Illinois, and he had explored a lot of ancient like petroglyph sites and things that are down there. And so he took us to some of these locations. And what a lot of people don't know is in Southern Illinois, there's a series of hilltop forts that run along the bottom of Southern Illinois, all along the bottom. And then you've got the Mississippi River coming on the one side, and you got the Missouri River coming along the other side, and they meet at the bottom of Illinois. So it creates this separate protected area in the bottom of the state that's very difficult to access. And along these hilltop forts, it's really cool because they're built geographically. I don't know why, but there's cliffs on the north, east, and west sides of these hilltop areas. And then on the back side, it slopes down. But we went to some of these hilltop forts, and we got in. A lot of them are private property, but some of them are parks now. But we were able to get in because of Mark.
yeah,
Mark. Yeah.
Because Mark knew some of these people that owned some of these places. And so we went to this private property and climbed in on top of these forts. But the cool part is on the backside that wasn't protected by cliffs, there was what?
There were rock walls, stone walls and things, and there's still remnants of those walls now. And so the front part is protected. Around the rest of it, I mean, there's cliffs, and they're a long way down. And so they only had to protect themselves in a certain area.
Yeah.
And a lot of those had protected pathways coming into them, so that you could only come in single file. And so if you were attacking them, they had a big advantage, so they could kill you one at a time as you came in, basically.
it was like a place of entrance in the Book of Mormon, right? Where you had a kill zone. You could come through and stand above them, and you took them through this little maze. They also had a back door.
Yeah, that was kind of fun.
I couldn't fit through the back door, but the skinny Lamanites, they could, and Scott and my kid Jake.
We made it. You made it.
Oh, I got stuck halfway. And Don Jensen came with us, who's a good friend of mine. He was 80 at the time, and he's like shaking his head. He's like, "We're gonna have to life flight you out of here. You cannot make it. You just died. The Lamanites killed you." So anyway, but it did have that back door.
But you could stand in front of where that back door was, and you could not tell it was there because it was hidden in the rocks. And you did have to come down, and part of it, there was like a 90-degree turn, and if you weren't skinny enough, you wouldn't make the turn. It was tough, and so it was not someplace they could be attacked. Even if they discovered it, they really couldn't attack.
You couldn't attack up because it was it was
a way to
narrow,
get out.
And lots of places for people to drop rocks on you or whatever.
Yeah.
It also had one of the features of these forts with, the walls are there, and a lot of the settlers would come and they'd take those rocks and then they would use them to build their houses or a cellar or whatever. And so they'd been taking them out. And it'd be arduous to take them up.
Oh yeah, they were huge rocks.
They're huge, and the people there. I remember there was this old lady that had a house. Remember, we went and knocked on her door, and Mark was talking to her, and she's talking about all the stuff they find, in her yard and around there, these Indian artifacts. But they also have springs at these places of refuge or these hilltop forts, and so they have a water source. They protected them. They're protected by the water on the one side. They're protected by the cliffs on the other. And they're spread apart it was about a day's walk from each one.
I don't know if it was a day's, but they all had a line of sight.
They had a line of sight.
So they could use mirrors or mica, whatever,
or smoke,
flash or smoke. And so there was a line of sight to the next
They weren't close together though. They were spread out.
Yeah.
They were spread out, but there was a line of sight between them all.
Yeah, they're all in a line, and they're, like Scott said, they're part of the park system now, or they're on private property. And one of the other cool things that was there was the first book that or magazine that Wayne ever put out had a picture of a hand with a hole in it, and it was
Ancient American
magazine.
There we go.
There you go, Wayne. There's a plug. And it had this hand with a hole in it with a bunch of with birds and other animals on this wall, and it was interesting. Wayne's like, that's the first cover of my magazine, right? And we're there, and there's a lot of graffiti. It's down low, and they have fire pits, and there's people hanging out down there where it's easy to get to at the bottom of this one park, and we took pictures of that hand with a hole in it.
Mm-hmm.
We said to Wayne, have you ever seen anything else like this? And he's like, no, but it's cool. But we're just there to go to this auction and to see these forts. And we saw the hand and some of these petroglyphs. And we had no idea that we would ever see anything else like that. Right. But that's the cool part about this.
Well, and I remember going to that first petroglyph site, and we were just kind of like, oh, this is kind of cool. So we were just kind of taking some pictures and didn't think much of it.
Yeah.
And then later that afternoon, Mark takes us to the second site, which is called the Whetstone shelter site. I did research for my book. That's how I know the name of where we went. But it is in the middle of nowhere. Like, we had to go up a power trail up these different hills and
Following the
through
power
this
lines.
forest. Yeah, power line trail. And then Mark, he randomly sees this log on the side of the trail. He's like, oh, this is the spot. Let's go off. And I remember turning off there, and it was like a cliff.
It was a cliff.
Yeah.
We were going down a freaking cliff.
You go down the cliff, and at the bottom of the cliff,
Trees are growing out, so you can hold on to them as you go down.
I thought Don was gonna die.
Don at 80 did it, and
Yeah.
you were sliding, basically holding on to trees. But at the end of this cliff, it drops 600 feet down to the Mississippi, and so you're just like, please stop, right? And
Well, and Mark, when he started down there, he said it's easier this way. He just got on his
slid down there.
sat down and just slid. But the rest was road to walk down, but we held onto the trees.
Yeah.
Came around the bend and stuff, and there's brush and everything, and all of a sudden there's an opening there
Oh yeah.
with the panels there. There's a place where you can stand, and you call it a cave, I call it an opening.
Yeah, it was covered or semi-covered, and it was in this cove.
Panels along there.
And you could look out and see the river.
Oh, it was
600 feet
gorgeous.
below.
It was gorgeous.
And he'd been coming there for 20 years. There's no signs or anything. People have not graffitied the site like the lower site because they don't know where it is. It was different. Everything was carved, and every wall was covered, and nothing had been messed with. That had just been protected because nobody knows about it except for Mark and his buddies at the university. And they're the type of people that'll preserve it. And so we're just looking at all these things, and we see different symbols, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of mind-blowing. And he wanted to show us the other thing, that with a lot of these sites, they line up with a solstice, either a winter or summer solstice or an equinox, something that is a celestial event that's happening, and they'll align the site so that you can see those things, right? They aligned everything with the lunar calendar too, which is really interesting because that's what the Jews do. And so everything's lunar, and this site was no different. It aligned with the solstice.
Right.
Yeah.
The solstice.
So I remember Mark telling us about the throne. It's like, you got to check out this throne. So we get down there, and sure enough, like, it was kind of, there was this area inside this
Alcove.
cave section,
Kind of
alcove,
scooped out.
and it looked like a chair. It'd been carved in this rock, but then behind the chair, behind this throne, there were 3 petroglyph panels with all different kinds of
Yeah,
symbols.
in a row, and then a line, and then a row.
Yeah, there
and then a
there
line.
was a line to delineate the 3 panels, and you could tell that those lines had been carved out.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was incredible, and yeah.
And then on the seat itself, it looked like there were
there were
carvings.
carvings on the seat.
And I said to him, I'm like, this doesn't make, so you sit on this? And he's like, yeah, here's what happens. You sit on the throne, and then if you look over your right shoulder, there was a crack in the mountain. And he's like, it's the craziest thing. We've been here with the solstice, and when it comes through, it crosses across your body, and it dies in that hole. It goes into this crevice.
That lines up into that.
He's
crevice.
like, so it's really cool. And so yeah, so we sit there and we let the white light go across our chest, and it just kind of comes across slow and goes into this hole. And I'm like, huh. Well, how come there's all these panels behind here? And he's like, oh, we don't really know, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's like, oh, we don't know. And I'm like, well, what if the light came across so it could like hit the panel, and each symbol, because it had multiple symbols, you're reading the symbols as it goes through there, right? He's like, oh, who are you guys? We're like, we're just nobody. We just are like thinkers, right? We're just critically thinking about all of these things. And there was the circle with the cross on it. And he's like, oh, that represents time, right? Time forward, time back. And some of them were just straight. And he's like, we don't really know what it means. And so we're looking down this panel, and as it goes past the guy's body that's sitting on the throne into the crack, there's hands with holes on it on both sides.
Right.
So tell me about that.
Yeah, so we're looking at the wall. There were, in this particular location, there was a lot of hands.
Yeah.
Yes.
And with holes in them. And there were circle crosses. And as we're looking at the one panel, all the hands were either single hands or they were double hands. But in this particular case, there was a set that had the thumbs on opposite sides. And not only that, but it was like engraved into the rock. So you could actually feel like where the bottom of the palm was, because it was actually etched into rock. Same with the fingers. And so I'm looking at it, and John, called John. I'm like, John, come over here for a minute. Make that sign of those those hands are making. And he put his hands up, and they went like this. No. And we were just like, oh my gosh.
It was and the circle, it was cut out, was in the palm of the hand.
Yeah. So we just kind of just stood there, and we're like.
And it was where the light came through. One was on each side of that, like this, and then the light from the solstice would come right between them.
Yeah, we were like, this is crazy. We were like, this really looks like Christ, like what we would picture Christ holding his hands out doing.
Yeah.
Showing the people.
Versus like this, where you see the back of the hand and they put it on like this. You can see the palm.
And then right underneath that was a circle cross. And then so we started to think, like, we started making connections. We're like, hands with holes, Christ putting his hands out. And then we're like, okay, what could the circle cross represent? And we're thinking, well, cross, death, circle is the sun, life. What a perfect symbol for Christ, right? And for Christ's resurrection. Right. And we were freaking out. And then Mark, again, he's like, who are you guys again?
He's like, where did you guys come from? He's been coming there for 20 years. And then we went, there were all these carvings. There was a place where like you would put liquid and it would come down. And there were these other symbols that have to be significant, but we don't know what they are. Wayne kind of knew what some of them were. But we're back to this throne, this king of the seat of the king, right? Where you sit there and watch the light go across. And I'm standing there and I go, that had these jagged cuts in it, in the seat. And I'm like,
it was weird.
Mark, why does it have those? It has stuff in the seat. And he's like, I don't know. He's like, we just sit on it. And I'm like, how come you don't know? You're like the guy, right? And Mark's awesome. And so he's like, I don't know. And I'm like, I just had the impression that to put my hand in it or, on it. And I said, can I touch this? Because we didn't touch anything. We were respectful. And he's like, well, we sit on it. So you can do it. He's like, I think so. He's like, it's fine. You can hurt it. And so I put my hand down and my hand fit it was bigger than my hand. It was longer than my hand, but I put my hand in it and it fit perfect. And you could feel that this part here had been, all of it fit perfect. It didn't look like a handprint until you put your hand in it. And I was like, whoa, they're looking at us. And I'm like, my hand fits perfect in this, but their hand that they had carved was actually a little longer. And it's sitting there, and I'm looking at this thing, and I don't have the best eyesight. And my son Jacob goes, Dad, put your hand right there. He's like, I can see because I described to him, I could feel this, right? And he's like, that's carved out right there, Dad. And I'm like, what are you talking about? So then he's like, just put your hand there. I put my hand there, and the knob right here for my thumb was cut out, every finger, and all of this.
Just
and
a lot lighter.
Was completely different. But I put my hands like this, and I was like, what did we do? It was like,
we were like, whoa.
And then I looked up like this, and I could see the panel, but I'm leaning over like this, and I had the impression to kneel. And I'm like, okay, I think I know what this is. So I knelt down, and Mark goes, whoa, who are you guys? And we're like, I don't know, but
well, that's why I was saying that it was high for a seat, but it was just right for when you...
So when I kneeled, my hands were here, and it fit perfect. And I looked up, and you could see all three panels. Then I'm facing that light now as it's red. My hands are here. The light comes here, and it goes across through the crack with the hands with the holes on them. And we're like, this is not a seat. This is an altar. And it had been carved, the whole thing. And Don, who is really a spiritual giant, just a good person, he's like, whoa. And he's been around. I mean, he's 85 in a couple days, and still doing well. But he's like, what is this place, right? And so it was different. We had never seen an altar that you could put your hands on. So we each took turns, right?
Yeah, and it was definitely, they were inverted handprints because there was actually a divot for your thumb.
It fit perfect with
your hand. There was carved for your palm, and then each finger was actually cut out of the rock.
Yeah.
There was
you wouldn't see,
it was crazy.
You wouldn't even know. I mean, when you're looking at this part, it looked like just jagged.
But you could see that it was there, but the other one was
you couldn't even see it.
Harder to see.
Mm-hmm.
When taking pictures, you could see the little bit better.
You could see it
camera.
super good in the picture.
But
the
just with your eyes and the shadows and stuff, you really couldn't see that left hand very good.
There was this thing that was cut out, like there was a place to put some kind of oil or blood or something, and it came down a trough, and it would have went right across that panel. There. And we didn't have anything to test that out, but we could see it. So this whole thing, and then as you went around the corner where we came in, there was another one. There was another panel and another place that had been carved out all the way down to where your knees go in. And Don actually found that one and was like, you guys come over here. So it was a completely different, it was kind of like an L shape where we come in this way and then come back and then out like this.
Yeah.
And it was one of the really most amazing things. Like, we felt like we were Indiana Jones, but in a spiritual way, because we were like, when you kneel down and your hands are here and you can see these symbols, I don't think that it was a coincidence. No one had ever seen that. And I called Mark a year or two later and said, hey, we want to go back there. And I'm like, do you remember me? And he's like, oh yeah, we're going back. He's like, we'll get all this stuff and go back. And because he had never had those types of experiences either, and he's a very good Christian.
Yeah.
So yeah, we love Mark, and for him taking us there, and it was a sacred experience to just contemplate these people knowing Christ. And
I mean, obviously they knew that prayer was sacred. They knew that there was that site obviously sacred. It was hard to get to. It was up on a cliff.
Yeah.
They spent countless hours carving all of that into the rock.
Yeah. I mean, there's hundreds. Just the actual throne itself, and or not the throne, but the altar and the other altar and the panels. I have never seen anything like that. And I've looked at, all of the petroglyphs and
We've gone to a lot of different places.
we've been to a lot of these things where there's miles of them, but nothing like this. And so now we found 2 places with the hand in the hole with the circle cross, and we're like, we're never going to find it. Have you ever found anything like this, Mark? And he's like, nope, but I'll go wherever you guys want to go. And we're like, where we're going to go? And he's like, I'm going to take you to this place that is another fort, but it's surrounded by water. You go down this railroad went through there, so you kind of walk the railroad.
Yeah.
And it's this beautiful area, right?
It is gorgeous.
There's lily pads out in the water, and you come up this back and you can see the wall. So the unprotected area, you can see the rock wall that they built. And it was, I think, a state park too, right?
It was part of one, but
Yeah,
I mean,
he's like
we had
that.
to walk quite a ways.
You had to
He's
walk
like,
in there.
he's like, this is where I go to have a picnic with my kids, right? And I said, are we going to find, what are we going to find any, petroglyphs or
Now we were
anything?
kind
And
of
he's
on the lookout too, right?
Well, and Scott and Jake were like eagle eyes, right? They could see stuff. And so we were like looking around. Everywhere we went now, we're waiting to see something. And he's like, there's nothing here. I've been coming here for 20 years. We have picnics. It's beautiful. I'm like, we go off this cliff. Maybe there's some hidden room down there.
Yeah.
He's like, no. He's like, no. And so we're just walking around, right?
Yeah. And then, so I went to the back side of this hilltop fort area, and I looking down the cliff, kind of checking it out, and I turn around, and on the rock behind me, no joke, was another set of handprints with a hole in the palm. And then Jake comes up behind me, and he's like, there's a circle cross right there. And we were all like, we were freaking out at that point.
We were in another spot.
That's
like, guys.
Yeah.
And Mark says, well, we just sit on that rock all the time to have our picnic. He says, I never saw those.
Yeah.
So yeah, there were 2 handprints with holes in the palms and a circle across. But the cool part is it was in a hilltop fort.
Yes.
So that connected the hilltop forts
to these same people.
to these people that did the altar, the prayer altar.
Right.
So now we know that these people prayed. The people that built these hilltop forts prayed because they were the same people, and it was an amazing connection.
But you had to have eagle eyes. I mean, nobody had seen it. Mark's like, I've never seen that. I don't know how you saw that. Who are you guys? And we're like, I don't know, but we have, right?
That was good.
But that's the third one, right? That everyone had seen the one down by the fire pit,
Right.
but nobody had seen those other ones. And Mark had, but he had never seen that one. The rock that it was sitting on, we knelt down by it to see, maybe this is another, but it wasn't carved.
No.
And it was different, but it was just like an affirmation that a confirmation that these were the same people.
Yeah.
And we didn't go on this trip looking for that.
No.
We didn't.
None of this.
It wasn't, even on our radar. We're just going to look at the forts. We wanted to look at the forts and see how they built them and why are they dragging these huge rocks up these cliffs, and these, it's crazy because people are like, well, they were just clearing their fields. There are no fields there. You don't clear your fields and
Clear up on the hill
and take it up the hill.
They build massive stone walls.
They knew they were forts, and they call them that. And it's like Fort Ancient, right? It had these huge fortifications and these cliffs around it. And now they're like, well, this was a ceremonial site. What? Like, if it's a ceremonial site, you don't need to fortify it.
Yeah.
Right?
Why do you need a wall?
Why are you building it on the edge of a cliff and then enclosing the rest of it? And so, there's, you're always going to fight that narrative, but there are definitely forts in North America, and we've been to a lot of them.
Yeah.
But it's amazing. There's still walls that are 6 feet tall.
Oh yeah, and they go
You could walk them forever.
Yeah, and you're like,
Yards,
how does this
football fields.
exist? How does this exist?
Yeah.
Nobody tells you about this stuff, but it's incredible. It's like a feat of engineering to have these walls, and we were just standing by them, walking by them. There's a lot of them are still there.
So
I have a picture of that. I have a picture of all of this in my book, by the way. So that's why I wanted to talk to you guys about it, because I do talk about these sites that we find and some of these discoveries we made, but I don't talk about the auction. I don't talk about the axes. These are really cool things that people don't know exist around Nauvoo.
Right.
And if in the Doctrine and Covenants, Joseph Smith said that Zarahemla was across from Nauvoo. He says to name that place Zarahemla. Well, if that's the case, this makes sense, right? Having hundreds of axe heads being found, having countless artifacts. Who in the church even has ever heard that artifacts exist at Nauvoo? Like, that's just not a thing that anybody even knows. But we've seen it.
yeah,
We've
and
seen tables and tables and tables of artifacts, and it's incredible. I mean, you can just see, like, just to build one of those, like, that's a ton of work to make an axe head out of rock. And there's hundreds of them there.
Yeah,
you know,
and,
it's just crazy.
You know, the ones at the auction, they had boxes full of these that are broken that they couldn't get rid of, you know, because they were damaged. We were okay with the broken ones. I think, you know, some of them are.
Yeah, I should have brought some. I have some that are.
I have some that are
They're
broken
worn
too.
down. They were used so much that the blade was worn down.
And the big ones, it's interesting too, because they have ones like this. I'm telling you, they're huge. And the Adena stuff is big. So their arrows are different. Their stuff is big. These were big people.
Yeah.
Just to wield that. And so you have both of these cultures that are crossing all the time. And it's interesting too, because the Jaredite culture died out, and then here come the Mulekites and the Lamanites and the Nephites, right? And by the way, these things that they built are massive. And they circle the square. They have the same math that the people in Egypt had. Mm-hmm. They use the same degrees in the things that they built, and they have roads that go for miles in a straight line, and earthen circles, and
smooth.
They're using the waterways to get through there, and where Mordecai Hopewell's place is, which it's a very sacred place too, that we went on another trip. And so Myron and I went, and Myron and my wife and I are walking this ditch, and you can see the berm, and it's built up, and then there were palisades on top of it and towers that would protect it, and it was, you know, and then as you came down there was a wall, but the whole thing was walled, and it had this 3-tiered mound that was inside of another wall, so it was very sacred. That's where they found most of the artifacts. Tens of thousands of artifacts that Smithsonian found, but even if you go to that park, Hopewell Park, it's a state park now, you can see the opening of the trees. Trees don't grow on it because it's so compacted, but you come down that entrance, and at the bottom I think there's 28 mounds there, these mounds, but there are the big mound they dug into, but the little mounds they dug into too, and in the 1800s, a guy came and dug into this one mound, and they found 8,004 perfectly flinted weapons, and they're big. They're as big as my hand. Like, we put my hand next to the thing, and they were put down like this and then like this, and they were organized perfectly in rows, and they buried weapons of war in this ceremonial mound, 8,004 of them. I don't know what that significance is, but that's what they had in there. And they were perfectly flinted and then buried. And when they did these mounds, Myron's an engineer, they used different materials.
Yeah.
And then they usually encrusted them with some kind of a cement, which, you know, they're not supposed to have in North America, but they have it all over, and sealed off the mound. And then for what? Right?
Yeah.
So this Mordecai Hopewell place, the place that these people are named after, the people that happen to just disappear the same time the Book of Mormon says they do. And they move from that place to, they go east, right? And they end up at the Hill of Morah, and then they don't exist anymore. But they had a ceremonial mound with weapons that were buried. And I went there the first time, I never saw that. We didn't even go over there, but I was like, Scott, can you believe this?
Yeah,
This is
cool.
crazy. And they were literally the size of your hand. It wasn't like a little arrow that they had
No,
buried.
they were big.
It was like a spear point. And, you know, that it was business, and it was perfectly flinted. And I thought, how did they overlook this? Like the evidences, Joseph Smith was promised the evidences would come out of the dirt, right? You'll be able to see it. Well, if you have eyes to see, there's a lot of evidence. And, you know, Joseph Smith said that he walked over the plains of the Nephites, right? Roving over the mounds of that once beloved people, picking up their bones and telling their stories. Well, we've kind of done that. We've been to that place. Mordecai's place is special because it was preserved because he was a doctor, right? He didn't plow it under. He went and had it done right. And that's why these people are named after him, this culture, because of the things they found there were so magnificent. And anytime they found another mound, if it had an effigy pipe, or if it had pearls, or if it had some of these arrowheads, they're like, oh, that's Hopewell. And so there's a reason it was preserved. That's not a coincidence. That wall is still there. You can walk it today. And I'll tell you this, my brother had a sacred experience. He knew that the Book of Mormon was in North America because he had a personal revelation. Myron and I and Scott, we're Holy Ghosters. We want to first and foremost follow the Spirit, and we want to see the cool stuff out there. It's not going to change our testimony. These rocks aren't going to change our testimony, but they are fun. And we have seen things that have strengthened our testimony of the Book of Mormon.
That's right.
So it hasn't been one of those things where the first time I went on a trip back there, I said to my wife, I don't know if this is where the Book of Mormon took place, but God does, and he can tell me. So if I have a sincere desire to know, then he can reveal those things to me, or he can say, no, you should be in Guatemala, right?
Yeah.
Which I'm cool with. Or I want to go to Machu Picchu, that's fine too. Did the Lamanites get down there? Probably. And so as for me and my house, we know where that's happened. I've had spiritual experiences with both of you. Your dad did. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to talk to him about them here, but things where I know in my bones where this took place, at least some of those things took place. And Myron and I have had on multiple trips experiences where like, how did that happen? Right? We weren't.
Whoa, did that really?
We had an open heart, but we were surprised.
Still, yeah.
And I think we were surprised when we went to that cave and found an altar.
Right.
How many people can say they've seen an altar in North America? I mean, you
carved in stone.
Right. Yeah.
Carved out of the wall of an open cave, an alcove.
Right. That's why it was cool, right? Because
it was unreal.
We had no expectations going in, and then to find something like that, it's just it was an experience of a lifetime. So, but yeah, it's been great. I feel like God gave us those experiences so we can share them, and that's why I wanted to have you guys on the show so we can share some of these really cool experiences that most members of the church will never have and don't know anything about.
Most people in the United States don't know what's out there.
Right.
And all these mounds and these cities and roadways, and a lot of them are preserved. Probably 90% of them got plowed under.
Yeah.
And so there's tens of thousands of these sites that would have been that they can see through LiDAR imaging and stuff that were there. But nobody's educated about it. It's not in our history books.
Right.
You talk to somebody about it and they're like, oh, you're crazy.
Right. But there might be a little sign next to some of these locations.
There's a little sign in
right?
those, yeah.
If anything.
If you don't go there, you don't experience it.
Right.
Right? And so we've had some awesome experiences going to those places, bushwhacking through bush and brush and
Chiggers.
and termites, or not termites, but
Those are awesome.
ticks.
Yeah.
And those kind of things that most people will never experience, but the stuff is there if you look for it.
Right.
The people who live there in these little towns and places that you go, all they know where all this stuff is. They know it. And, they're just...
But for them, it's just kind of commonplace. That was here. It's just life, but it's not written anywhere. It's not, it is, but not to the general public.
Book of Mormon.
Right.
So I think that a lot of people who get caught up in is the Book of Mormon here or there, or, and tumult of words and opinions, right, happen. And if you have the Holy Ghost and you're honest, then God will reveal it to you. And I think that's the difference. There were people that were on our trip, and I'm like, wow, look at this. And they're like, not interested at all. They're like, no, that's probably didn't happen there. And I'm like, really?
Or that's cool. What's next?
Let's go look at some more rocks. And I'm thinking, well, there's got to be more to this. The civilization was very advanced. It had all of this technology, this map. They lined up everything with the lunar calendar. They knew the stars. They knew where they were on the map within a few feet. We can't do that today. We're not educated enough to figure that out without a GPS, but they could do it.
Yeah.
And these weren't hunter-gatherers. Everybody in the Hopewell culture knew they had barley. They had all of these products that they're agrarian. And they also had flocks, and they also had domesticated animals. That's a fact. You can go into the museums and they'll tell you this. They also had fine twined linen. Right? Remember when we went in there and I said to the ranger, I'm like, you're showing me the Indians in
loincloths
or what's the other thing? The buckskins, right?
Buckskins, yeah.
And it's like 100 degrees. We're in Ohio, and I'm like, nobody's wearing that. And she just laughed, and she's like, and I got her on tape, right? And she's like, no. She's like, what they really wore was they would take milkweed and they would weave clothes that was finer than silk. And I'm like, what did you just say? Like fine twined linen? And she's like, yeah. And they would dye it and they would paint it. And she's like, we have little samples. And guess where the samples came from? They stuck to metal, to copper armor.
Oh, yeah.
So it had fused to the armor. So they'd wear the clothes and put the armor over it, breastplates and head plates. And then they would have these fabrics that were preserved, right? Because it'll be the first thing to go. But they were preserved because they fused to the metal. She's like, oh yeah, we've got that stuff. And they didn't wear buckskins. She's like, if they wore that, it was in the winter, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in the winter where they had parakeets and they had, there's parakeets in all these mounds, which is crazy, which tells you the temperature was different too. But there's all these evidences and the metallurgy and all of those things are right there in the museums. That's the other thing that you would see, like you brought up Dave's copper band there or jewelry. These weren't people that were hunter-gatherers. They had vast networks where they're getting these things from the mica from places, the obsidian, the shark's teeth, the whatever they, even the stuff they flinted came from specific places, right, where it was the best to get.
Yeah. Well, it was cool to see that when we would go to museums and they would show, like, hey, look what all these things that came from this mound, and here's where it came from in the United States. And they had all these arrows pointing all across the country where they had verified where these materials came from a mound. And you're like, wow, that's cool. I didn't know that. But now I know it because I went to this random museum in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah,
it was fun.
One museum that we went to. So when we went up to the place where the auction was, we're all in a van, and Dave is the oldest brother, Scott's dad, and he was driving, and we're in the van, and we've got Wayne, who's the archaeologist. He's the expert. And Mark had stayed down in southern Illinois, and so we're driving all the way up, and we're like, how far is this to our hotel so that we can, it was just outside in Iowa, just across from Nauvoo. And do you remember the town?
Can't think of the town. No.
Anyway, it's just this tiny town where this was, and where this auction house was. So we are driving for hours. We're like, how many miles did you say that was? I've got this. I got it on my GPS. I got this on my GPS. And what would we?
We were going down the craziest path.
And the roads kept getting more narrow and more narrow, more narrow.
Goat road. I look over at Scott and I'm like, I don't think we're on the right road. And we were driving down this goat road, and we look over, and there was a highway, and cars are going like this, zoom, zoom, and we're going like this. And I'm like, I think we're supposed to be over there. No, I know where I'm going. I'm following the GPS. And I look at Wayne, and I'm like, hey, Wayne, are we on the right road? And he'd do this.
Over there.
See that? Where all the cars are? We're supposed to be over there. So for hours, we're in this drive. And finally, we get there, and
we got to some little town.
Yeah, we got somewhere, and then Myron's sitting up there with Dave. And so tell him what happened.
Well, he stopped. I can't remember if he stopped for gas or just to get a drink.
Yeah, we were probably out of gas because we've been driving for hours.
There's bicycles passing us on the road and stuff.
There was. It's not exaggerating.
He pulls up. He grabs the phone from me and says, "I don't know what's wrong with this navigation thing." And he starts messing with it. It's set on bike mode.
Yeah.
We were on a bike route.
So we're on a bike route.
We were on a bike route for hours.
So we had some.
So the next day we were like
fun side trip.
Yeah.
It's
like
some country you
about every 30 minutes. Wayne, where are we supposed to, is this the road? It's over there. So the next day we were going to the temple, right, to Nauvoo. And we're like, we don't have 3 hours to go to the temple. And we're like, it's only like 34 miles, and you got to cross the river. Mm-hmm. So we're like, I don't know. Maybe this is how it is out here in the country. We got there in like 20 minutes. Yeah. We got ice cream. We went around the whole town. We're like, Dave, you cannot. And then the funny part is he blamed Myron.
Blame me.
Dave, you're in heaven. You know this is true. He blamed Myron for putting it on the bike route. And Myron at the time had a flip phone.
That's right. I had no idea what was doing.
He barely got a smartphone.
Go around the thing.
He's like, why is this bike making this little wheels around this? It's so nice. But that was a fun part of the trip too. So when you go on these trips, you have
even though it was a long ride.
It was a long ride. At the end of it was dark. We get to the hotel and we're like, we got to get something to eat. Remember this? And Don's 80 years old, and we were taking turns kind of treating each other to dinner, like Scott would pay her, I would pay her, Myron or Dave. And so Don hadn't paid yet, and we're driving in on this main road. We could see our hotel, and it had this Chinese buffet restaurant, and the lights were like flickering, and half of them were on. And we're like, we're so hungry, but anywhere but there. We don't want to eat there. And so we get back to the hotel, and we pass like a couple other restaurants. And so where are we going to go? And Don's like, what did he say?
Chinese buffet.
He's like, hey, let's go to that Chinese buffet, my treat. So he probably had his hearing aids out because we already told him we didn't want to go there. So we go there, and it was rough. But nobody got sick.
Rough. Yeah.
Nobody got sick, but we went to the Chinese buffet, and Don treated. I think it cost
ones there closing it down.
For 6 of us. It was like $23 or something. It was rough.
It was pretty funny.
Yeah. But you have memories like that where you have, and especially if you go with Wayne May, you're going to eat. You're going to stay in a crappy hotel, and you're going to eat crappy food.
No offense, Wayne.
No offense, but that's what he likes. If it says quality in on the outside, we're probably staying there. And you got to check for bed bugs. And,
it's part of the adventure.
People open the door to your room, and you're like, what are you doing? They're like, this is my room. I have a key. And we're like, so do we. So how do we work this out? So open door policy. But yeah, fun things like that that have happened on those trips too, where you're just like, this is kind of crazy. Or driving a huge bus down through Rochester and the wrong neighborhood to get to a Golden Corral because Wayne wanted to go to a Golden Corral. And we're like, we're going to die. We're in the wrong neighborhood, but
Yeah.
some fun memories that way too.
It's been fun.
Yeah,
This was a good adventure going on this particular trip, and yeah, I just wanted to have you guys on and share some of the cool things that we discovered.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
It's fun.
Hopefully
Hopefully
you-
sat here, but
I told you you were going to talk more than me, and you're about the microphone.
because you made me sit here.
The right choice.
yeah. Well, hopefully you guys have learned some cool stuff that you didn't know before, and the whole point of sharing all this with you is to help you, gain a stronger testimony. If you're struggling with your faith, just to know that some of these things are out there is, can help build your faith. And our hope is that, it's built our faith and testimony. We were fortunate enough to go there and see these things, but hopefully us sharing this is going to help you as well. So thank you for joining us today. Thank you guys for being on the show. Appreciate it. Love you. And tune in next week for my 5th and final installment about my book, Faith to Stay. And if you want a free digital copy and a free audio copy, go to faithtostay.com and you can get those there. And we will talk to you next week with another episode of Latter-day Lights. Till then, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
On today's episode, and a friend and a bunch of other people adding to the
Some
list.
homeless people. And some
I just got to get through this part, and then we can actually have a real conversation.
so Wayne May, Mark.
The reason why we went to Illinois was because somebody died.
I'm not sure it's a laughing matter.
Yeah, okay.